Hey everyone, Jared here, and once again you find me in front of our pool. If you watched the previous video, you saw us disassemble the pool that we purchased from our neighbors. In this video, I'll show you how we set up the pool. I still plan on publishing a short video showing the excavation of the pool site, but I've been receiving so many requests about this video that I wanted to get it out first. So, here it is. So one of the first things you're going to notice here is that the pillar bases and the bottom rings that actually hold the wall are already in place. Now you will see the placement of these in the excavation video near the end, but it shouldn't be a big deal that I've already jumped forward into that step. Those bottom wall ring sections just slide into those pillar bases. So the first thing we're doing here is just having my son help me do some rough measurements and make sure that it is somewhat round. So most pools have sand underneath their liners. I decided I did not want to go sand underneath the liner for a couple of reasons. Number one, sand can wash out. Number two, heel imprints, walking around, stuff like that will actually distort the sand a little bit, and then you will no longer have a perfectly flat bottom underneath your liner. So I've decided to go with foam board. Now I am going to use sand, but that's going to be for only 1 inch, and then on top of that will be this foam board. So what I'm doing now is laying out the foam board, getting the placement of each and every piece, and then I'm going to cut it to size. Once I get the wall up, it would be near impossible to cut each and every one of these and have the curves just right to sit inside the wall. So you can see we are lifting up the outer edge, sliding it under, I'm marking it, and then you're going to see I'm using a curved upper section that goes on top of the wall to actually use as a guide to mark the curve just to make sure everything is good. Then I'm cutting it to size and putting it back in place. So as you continue to watch the process, I want to talk about the sand a little bit more. So underneath the liner, almost every pool specifies about a 2-inch layer of sand. If I were to do this all over again, I would have purchased 2-inch foam board. I was already stretching my budget a little bit, so I ended up opting for 1-inch foam board and 1 inch of sand. Now, if I would have went with 2-inch foam board, I would not have had to have dealt with the sand at all. The sand proved to be kind of a pain in the butt. You have to spread out the sand and wet it a lot while you are putting it in place. I ended up talking to a buddy of mine who used to install pools in his college days and was explaining my frustration to him about trying to spread the sand and get it nice and level without leaving footprints everywhere. And he brought up a great analogy, and that is to think of the ocean. When you walk through sand on a beach and you're walking in the upper sections that are dry, you leave footprints. It's hard to walk in, the sand's moving, blah, blah, blah. But when you go down by the water where the waves are coming in and out and you walk across that sand, it feels almost hard as a board. And that's because the water has the sand drenched, and the sand is not wanting to move away. So it is a lot easier to keep your sand nice and flat and smooth as you're spreading it out and raking it if you drench the sand. I thought I was putting enough water down to just keep the sand, moist and wet, but I did not realize that I had to have it absolutely soaking drenched. So if you're going to use sand, make sure you use plenty of water and keep that drenched. One more tip for the foam board. The foam board I purchased was pre-scored. That way it would be easier for the end user to cut it or to just snap it and break it and have it fall in between joists or wall studs. Bad idea. The liner in your pool is under a tremendous amount of pressure and weight from the water, and it will actually force that liner down into that crack a little bit. And the issue that creates is not really as much about walking around the pool, but it gives a place for fine little amounts of dirt to get into and collect. So So if you were to look in my pool before it gets swept or before the robot runs through it, you actually see the fines down in those cracks. So here I am marking each and every insulation board panel. That way I can tell what order they go in and where each and every joint meets up. That way I can put these back in place once the wall is up. Once everything is marked, we remove all of the panels and just throw them in a pile. Now here's where the installation is going to start getting more difficult. So I remove a section of the bottom rail and am wheeling in the wall. The wall is very, very heavy, a little bit unwielding, especially as soon as you start to uncoil it. So it's not something that's really easy to work with, and you're going to want several people to help you. The more the better. You can see I'm lucky enough to have some friends and neighbors, kids, wife, everybody is here trying to help. To get ready for the wall installation, we're setting up a few columns. That way we will have something in place that we can use some of the metallic top plates to actually hold the wall so it does not collapse on itself. Now you can tell that we did not put every single column up yet, but while we were doing this, another thing we were doing is we're taking the rest of the materials and just spreading it around. That way it'll be close to where we need it when it's required. Now one of the decisions you have to make when putting up your wall is where you're going to put the holes. Now those holes are going to be for your skimmer and for the return. So for me, I decided to put it on the right hand side of the video here. That's kind of downhill away from the house. So if I want to drain, if I'm backwashing the field or anything like that, I'm over where I'm going to have the water be going away from the house out towards our field anyways. So the hardest part about putting the wall in is the curved sections at the bottom are almost like a U-shaped channel. Well, they really are a U-shaped channel. So you have to lift the wall up a little bit and get it to go down in that channel so it rests in it. So it's not just as simple as pushing it over against the outside. As you're unwinding it, you actually have to lift it up and then sit it down in. And then hold it, keep it from collapsing on itself, keep it from sliding and scooting, keeping all of your feet still, making sure the thing doesn't go too oblong on you. There's quite a bit you have to pay attention to. So then as we're moving around and we're putting this wall in place, we're going to start setting just a handful of these metal caps. You see my wife do it right there, set it on top, and all that does is just keep the wall from collapsing in. Now you can see how much of an orchestrated effort this is for everybody. I don't think I would want to do it with any less than probably about 5 people. You need somebody at the very beginning where you started because there's not much holding that up, keeping it from collapsing. You need somebody unrolling. You need somebody ahead of you a little bit. You need the person actually lifting it up, setting it down into the grooves. And then it's nice to have at least one other person that can run and get little bits and pieces here and there for you. So once again, I'm going to say a minimum of 5. I think we have, 6, 7 here, and end up working out pretty good. Now when we get the wall all the way around, we get it to where the bolt holes overlap, and we threw a couple bolts in there just to hold it in place. And then we're going to go around and kind of scoot the feet out, make sure everything looks fairly, round, not oblong once again. And then go ahead and set up the rest of our posts or pillars, columns, whatever you want to call them. And then put the rest of our little caps on to hold the wall in place. Another thing we're doing as we're working our way around here is we're making sure the pool wall fell down into the slit in the bottom rails. There were times where it may not have got fully seated. It may have had just a little bit of a curve, might be resting on an edge. So we're going around making sure everything is absolutely perfect and settled all the way down into where it needs to be. Now once the wall is up, the next thing you need to do is to put all the bolts in at the seams. So there's quite a few of them. I used my little cordless impact driver to help speed things up, but you're going to need somebody on the outside to thread the nuts on while you're holding the bolts on the inside. But it's said it takes a good little bit, and there's quite a few there to deal with. Now comes the first of a couple apologies. So the apology here is the fact that I did not record myself putting the sand in there. I am very sorry. I didn't get to see that. I'm sure there's lots of other videos out there that you can go watch and see people putting sand in. But at this point in time, you can see the sand obviously is already in and the foam board is on top. And we've started to tape it. You're going to want to run a minimum of a couple layers of tape on every seam, because once again, the weight of the water on the liner is even going to want to indent where those foam boards meet and indent the tape. So the more you're willing to spend on tape and the more layers you're willing to put on, the better it's going to be, and the more flat your pool bottom will be with the least amount of grooves. Now, if I had known that I was going to have issues with dirt laying in those little slits from the pre-scored foam board, I would have went ahead and taped every single one of those score lines. Now you can see that I just used regular old duct tape. I read about people using Gorilla Tape, duct tape, all different types of tape. I think the duct tape worked just fine. If I had to do it all over again, I would probably consider the foil-faced true ducting tape that seals up HVAC ducts. I think it would have been stronger and probably maybe even required fewer layers because it's not going to want to stretch under pressure. But as long as you go to the trouble of buying something that's a decent quality, take your time installing it, you can see we are rolling it out here, making sure it's got good contact. I'm sure you'll be just fine. So here's a final look at all of the foam board and the tape. And you can see everything looks good. It goes all the way to the edges. The seams are all taped. Unfortunately, the score lines aren't, but overall, it turned into a very, very nice base for the liner. So along with purchasing a new liner, another thing you're going to want to get is the corner triangular Cove pieces. Now, these do a couple things for your liner. Number one, they give you a nice smooth transition from the floor to the wall. But the biggest advantage of having these is they prevent your liner from being pushed out in the corner under the weight of the water. No matter what you do, nothing's ever going to be perfect over there. So if there is the smallest little gap and the water is able to push the liner into that crease or that slit, that hole, it will do it. So this prevents that from happening and gives a nice smooth transition up the wall. Another side benefit to these that I did not realize until later on once I purchased one was the robots like them. So I have a robot that will actually climb a wall, and it makes it a lot easier on the robot to go up the wall because it's able to hit this little ramp on the way up. Now as you're watching me put the Cove pieces in, it's a good time to take a look at the columns since we're getting this from a different angle now. You will see the galvanized metal top plates that actually hold the wall in place. But right now they're just temporarily holding the wall, but eventually they will be pulled back off, and then the upper tubular sections that go on top of the wall in the liner will be placed on, and then these go down over top of it and are screwed down. Once you have either your sand or the foam board or both installed, and then you have the corner cove in place, it's time to put your liner in. You're going to want to let your liner sit out in the sun for at least a few hours to warm up. And some of the earlier shots, you probably saw it sitting out there in the yard, kind of half unrolled, and that was on purpose. I wanted the sun to bake it. You want this to be nice and soft. You don't want it to be hard. You don't want to be fighting it, cracking it. It needs to stretch. So my daughter is here helping me just roughly pull it out to the edges, get it in place. And by the way, a liner does not have any holes in it to start. So don't worry yourself with orientation or anything like that with your return or skimmer holes in the wall. Once you have it roughly spread out, find somewhere to start and start clipping it over your edge. Now, there are 3 different types of pool liners. There's a cut to size, and you will just fold that over the edge, which is going to be, my opinion, probably one of the more difficult styles because you have to stretch everything into place first and make sure that you have all of the slack over the outside edge before you do any final cutting or putting your top ring on. I have a J-hook, and then there's also a beaded style that snaps in. So the hook I find to be the easiest. It just slides over the edge of the wall, and then it is held in place by the upper curved ring sections that are almost like a section of box tubing with a slit in it. Now, once again, you're going to need somebody to help you. The liner is going to fall right back down inside the pool if you don't have somebody help hold it where you start. But then as you're working your way around, you're going to have to pull off those galvanized top plates, put a section of this top ring on, and then put the plates back down to hold it in place. Now here you can see one of those tubular pieces that I was talking about. Now the galvanized piece right where my daughter's sitting is actually closer towards us and not sitting where it would be. If you can compare it to the column beside it, you can see what I mean. Now all you have to do is just continue to work your way around the pool and just get the entire thing hooked up over the top of the wall. Then once you have the liner all the way around, you can continue on putting on your, once again, all of your galvanized plates are on, screwed in, and then you can put your seat caps on, and then the trim pieces that go at the joints of your seats. And then here's where I need to make my second apology. I did not realize that the battery had ran out on the camera, so you missed the entire section of me actually spreading the liner out and putting some water in. But what I did is just turn on the garden hose and walked around, actually my daughter and I, and we just slid our feet around and spread the liner out as we added a little bit of water. You do not want to call a water truck. You do not want a bunch of stuff showing up until you have that liner stretched out and in place. So slide it around, just start with the garden hose. Once you get everything set and in place, then you can have water delivered. And here the water truck is on site, but you will notice in a minute when he pulls the hose up that we're actually filling the pool very slowly. By this time in the day, the sun is going down, it's late evening, and it's just not hot out anymore. Liners are meant to stretch. When this liner cools off and it's not wanting to stretch, what it actually will do is pull on your wall a little bit and cause it to buckle. So we noticed that one of the walls was sucking in just a little bit and decided that it would be a good time to stop. We'd call it quits. We got 1 truck's worth of water in the pool, and then he's going to come back tomorrow and then dump another whole truck in after the sun is up in its highest spot and the liner's warmed back up. Once again, do not call the truck guy until you are ready. He was super happy to find out that everything was as I said it was. The liner was already spread out. There was a little bit of water in the pool, and he didn't have to wait on us. He expressed his frustration at the number of sites he gets called to that are not truly ready for him yet. So I hope you found the video useful. Once again, I apologize for the couple little hiccups there, but this should give you a pretty good baseline on how to install your pool. As always, do me a favor and hit the thumbs up, like the video, subscribe, and hit the bell notification to be notified of upcoming videos, and drop me a line and leave me a comment. Let me know if this helped you, if there's anything I can add to a future video that might help you, but overall, I would just love to hear from you guys. Thanks, and have a great day.